Gentlemen, start your engines.
Go Speed Racer, go Speed Racer, go Speed Racer, go!
Okay, here we are in my shop, High Falls, New York. For people who don't know me, I'm Larry Ricky. I am the race director for the Accord Speedway Vintage Modifieds, and I wanted to go over the new rules for the Accord Speedway 80s Flashback Division. So, rule number one, we chose a 2010 and older chassis. This particular chassis is a 1995 Olson Pro. The reason we went with 2010 and older was because we wanted cars without flexible cross members, no rubber cross members. We wanted fixed cross member cars. Rule number two is, once again, fixed floor cross members, no bolt-in or rubber mount cross members. The torque arm slider must be in a fixed position. You can either fix the torque arm with a clinch collar or tubing spacers on the slide rails. What we're trying to do is take the rear steer and stuff out of the cars to make an older chassis competitive with the 2010 chassis. Coil spring cars, one coil spring per corner for suspension, no stack coils. The rear radius rods must be attached at equal locations on the frame measured from the motor plate. So, from the motor plate on the front of the back of the engine to the radius rod mount has to be the same distance on both sides. No short rod cars. We're trying not to induce rear steer. We want the cars to be very neutral. No left side panhard bars. As you can see, this car has a right side panhard bar. The boomerang and the panhard bar mount. So no left side panhard bars. Any steel main bodied shock. So we know all the major shock manufacturers produces a steel bodied shock, which is the least expensive of the shocks. So if the shock has a steel main body, you are allowed to have a Schrader valve so the shock can be rebuilt and recharged, but the shocks cannot be adjustable. The compression and rebound must be fixed. If you want to change compression and revalve, the shock must be revalved. The next rule is no bump stops or shock rubbers allowed. We're trying to get away from that type of technology. We want the cars to be very basic, very neutral. There are no titanium driveline components. Our tire rule for this class is 13 92-inch maximum tire. Any brand, any compound. So basically, dirt modified takeoffs, we're going to allow you to run Hoosier or any other brand you want, any compound, but a maximum of 13 inches wide, 92-inch circumference. Now, a crucial rule, which is going to require some fabrication on some cars. The rear frame length dimension from the center of the rear end housing to the back of the frame, not including the bumper pockets, can be a maximum length of 43 inches. The reason we chose 43 inches, the dirt rule book from 1991 was 40 inches. We gave an additional 3 inches to encompass some of the cars from the early 2000s, but what we don't want is the new long tail cars, because trying to mount a body, the car becomes very out of proportion, and Gary at the racetrack, the promoter, the owner, was very specific on he wanted the cars to be very traditional looking. Our engine rules for this division are the same as our classic car division, which we ran last season. And those rules are available on our Accord Speedway Vintage Modified website on Facebook. It says, we will be using the body dimensions for these cars and the sketch from the 1991 Dirt Rule Book for slab-sided small bodies. Some of the things we don't want. Look at the rules. We do not want Lexan quarter windows. We want the cars to have the aluminum quarter windows. We don't want you taking a modern body and narrowing it and just chopping the front of the door off and calling it a vintage car. The only difference in the rules is the original roof width from the 91 rule book was a 50-inch wide roof. No one produces a 50-inch wide roof. This particular roof I've had, it's 40 years old. It's a narrow, long fiberglass roof. So we are going to allow the 52-inch wide modern roofs to be used and the reproduction roofs with the 3-inch wicker bill on the back. So those are going to be allowed. There'll be an addendum to the rules shortly for that. The weight of these cars are 2,400 pounds. After the race with driver. One of the problems with some of the other groups and trying to control this 2010 and older chassis is we want you to build a traditional hood, scoop, and nose for the car. We don't want the Bicknell, the TO, the Troyer modern hoods and noses. It just makes the car look wrong for the era correct. So take a little pride in your work. Let's make something that looks traditional. One of the things I'm very proud about our Accord Speedway Vintage Modifieds is every one of the cars is a quality, beautiful race car. No independent rear suspension, that goes without saying. No cockpit, in-cockpit adjusters. Panhard rod, front or back coil springs, or torsion bars. Nothing internal. The brake bias and right front shutoffs are allowed. It says back bumper and scrub rails is a maximum of 2 inches outside of tires. Rear bumpers are 3 inches behind the rear body panel. We're trying to keep the cars from having these gigantic bumpers and scrub rails that are getting tangled up in traffic and, keep them traditional looking with the cars. So those are our rules. Those are where we're going to with the new 80s flashback division. And like I said, this is supposed to be budget racing. Our engine rules were formulated so an unsealed crate motor, an open sportsman engine from 10 or 12 years ago. Those motors are all over the place. An old Ironhead 358. All of those are allowed to run. We run everything on a 2-barrel carburetor, 500 CFM stock Venturi that's checked with a go, no-go gauge. We run HEI ignition. And for anyone who doesn't know Accord Speedway, the track itself is the great equalizer. The point of all this is to field a competitive car at a reasonable cost. These are by far the cheapest modified that you're going to be able to race anywhere on the East Coast. Accord Speedway Vintage Modified Division, the Classic Division, which is the class that we ran this past season in 2023. We are continuing with that class in 2024 with 2 changes to the rules. The 2 changes to the rules are we are lowering the weight from 2,600 to 2,500. What we found out is most of the cars that raced in that era, that 95 and older era, were having to add 200, 250 pounds of weight, and it became just impractical and unsafe. So the rules will be 2,500 pounds for the 2024 season. Also, last year we ran an open tire rule. After inventorying everyone that raced, 22 cars that ran with us last year, We only had one car that didn't run with the 1392 tire rule, which is the tire rule for the dirt modifieds that are currently racing. Most of the guys, including myself, purchased takeoffs from some of the larger teams. They're purchasing new rubber. We're racing on their used tires. So the rule for the 2024 season is 1392 rubber and any brand, any compound, but 1392 max circumference. And those are the only rule changes to the Accord Speedway Classic Modified Division, which is the steel body class.
Yeah, this is affordable racing. Anybody that wants to get into racing or has raced years ago and wants to get back into it, this is an affordable thing to do.
You can buy a good used motor. You can pick up a car. If you have some skills, you can really put together a nice competitive race car that you could win with. Moving forward, 2 divisions at Accord Speedway for the 2024 season.